two countries who've had a nightmare of a tournament. First up, England. While the Indian cricket fans celebrated another victory at the World Cup, much has to be said about the manner in which the England side has gone about their campaign in the tournament. Defending champions are surely not playing like one. Now, wins and losses are part of sport, and it's all right to be on the losing side once in a while. In fact, some losses are key to sort out certain aspects that may just put things back on track for teams. But just the way this English side has crumbled in these conditions has been something that we have to talk about. In the 6 matches they have played, they have lost 5, winning just 1 against Bangladesh. This is not just their worst performance as a country in cricket World Cups, but it is the worst campaign by any defending champion. At 5 losses so far, England now tops the list of most defeats for defending champions at the tournament, overtaking Australia's horrid 1992 campaign, Sri Lanka's 1999 attempt, and then of course a few others who still, however, managed to lose only 2 matches or less. Now that is significant, and it becomes more imperative to know the reason for such a loss. Could it just be that almost all of them are at the last phase of their career, most of them past 30? Could it also be certain unavailability of players who are key members like Jofra Archer or Reece Topley? Or is there some strife in the dressing room? Now, former England captain Eoin Morgan came out saying that there is something within the team that is definitely unsettled. He said, "I've never come across a sports team that has underperformed like this England team, given the expectations that is on their shoulders." To which head coach Matthew Mott firmly denied all these allegations, saying there was nothing wrong with the dressing room. Now, I caught up with former England cricketer and commentator Mark Butcher just a while back to shed some light on the disarray that one of the best white ball cricket teams till just a while ago find themselves suddenly in. All right, joining me here today is former England cricketer. He's a commentator as well, someone who's obviously observing the World Cup. Not really a very happy place to be if you are an English supporter, a cricketer fan. Thank you so much, Mark Butcher, to take out some time and join us here on Firstpost. Thanks for giving us this time to talk.
Not a problem at all. Yeah, it's right. It's a good day because England aren't playing, so all is well. Nice to see you.
Yeah, small successes, small victories. Yeah, one step at a time, Mark. But yes, speaking about that performance, came into the World Cup as favourites. Did something like this, I mean, obviously, if I asked you now in hindsight, would you even imagine a defending champion side playing the way they would? Your initial thoughts at just the way in which this campaign has gone about?
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody back here was realistic in thinking that India were strong favourites to win the whole thing, but that England would certainly make the semi-finals, and then, you know, once you get to that point, anything can happen. But if you'd have told me that a team that has, you know, the likes of Johnny Bairstow, Joe Root, Ben Stokes, Jos Butlers, Adil Rashid, Chris Wokes, etc., in it was going to play, or was going to, you know, perform so spectacularly badly, I would have said you were absolutely off your head. It has been, you know, they've sort of lurched from one bad performance to another. I think one of the things that sort of was perhaps the most shocking was the game against South Africa.
Right.
You know, they got off to a slow start, and that can happen in tournaments. England were a little bit undercooked, I think, in terms of their preparation. But when it got down to that sort of that big clash against South Africa, where you just felt, okay, well, now's the time for the big players to sort of stand up, and they spoke about it in the lead up about how they enjoyed the pressure and kind of were looking forward to a contest such as that. And then, you know, for them to sort of tactically get it so wrong with the toss and all of the changes that they made to the team, and of course then, you know, having done all of that, to get blown away again with the bat was just quite extraordinary, really. So it's not been good watching back here in the UK.
I can imagine, Mark. And before we sort of get into a little bit of a backgrounder when it comes to England and their campaigns, or generally how they take something like this forward, just a bit about the reason for such a performance. You know, there are various things that obviously that people observe, especially those who've watched the game for so long, who've watched and played cricket for long. What do you think would be the primary reason? Would you put it down to, there are a couple, right? Would you put it down to age? Would it put it down to, baseball going wrong, no prep? Where would you rest the primary reason for such a performance at?
I think there are lots of reasons, really. England, prior to the 2019 World Cup success at home, England's preparation was pretty much for at least the 2.5 years leading into it was all about that World Cup, almost to the expense of Test match cricket, of the availability of players for Joe Root for the Test matches, etc. I would say that the opposite has been true this time, whereby Matthew Mott and Jos Butlers sort of took over the sort of captaincy and coaching roles midway through last summer in Amsterdam against Holland, and since then they haven't really had sort of like the full sort of squad. They haven't really had the pick of the players that they would have wanted in preparation, and they haven't really had the series either to sort of test themselves and to see where perhaps one or two holes were appearing. Then you go back into sort of like the level below the international team, and the fact that 50 over cricket has now been relegated to a sort of second team tier competition behind the 100.
Right.
And so players who are trying to make a case for themselves to kind of break into what is an aging lineup for the 50 over game had no place to play or to sort of make a compelling case for themselves to be included. So you put all of those things together, and there are reasons there. But I still go back to the fact that you would expect players of the experience and the quality of the sort of the majority of the backbone of England's squad, you would have expected performances out of them that would have given them a chance to at least qualify for the semi-finals, despite all of those things. So there's been a failure in terms of players' personal performances. Perhaps you can look at the sort of like the captaincy and the leadership. Have they been able to get the best out of these terrific players? But at the end of it all, England have just been very, very bad, and they'll all be bitterly disappointed as much as we are back here.
Yes, Mark, and you just sort of led me to the next question. It's one thing to say, maybe not prepared or maybe found out and weren't really prepped enough for these conditions here in India. But Eoin Morgan recently, of course, he's the last World Cup winning captain as well. Eoin Morgan recently coming out saying that all probably isn't too well in the dressing room. That's a bold statement for a former England captain to make. Would you agree with that? Because it can't just be performances outside, it's what's happening inside that affects it too.
Yeah, I mean, well, people are always looking for another juicy narrative, aren't they? And Owen, to be fair, Owen's in India, and Owen's a lot closer in terms of age and in terms of vicinity to that dressing room. So if there was something, then I'm guessing he would hear about it. As far as I'm concerned, back here, I haven't heard that. But one thing I will say, and it's a fairly obvious point. You look at any of the teams that are below expectation in the World Cup, and there is always a little bit of internal strife when that happens. And that's because the players are very proud of their performances. That's because nobody likes being humiliated. And so therefore there are going to be disagreements and there are going to be arguments. I would be very surprised if there weren't, given the way things have gone. How that plays out in the future will be interesting to see. Look, England in the last two 11s that they've put out, the youngest player in the 11 has been Liam Livingstone at 30, right? You've got two or three 36-year-olds. Everybody else is sort of 32 and above. And so England's next white ball assignment, because let's write off, the World Cup is done, it's over. And England's next white ball assignment is in the West Indies in December. And in that squad there'll be a different captain. I expect Mott, the coach, will stay and have the opportunity to try and build something towards at the World Cup, because again, he and Buttler inherited somebody else's team, so they haven't had the chance to put a stamp on what happens. And there'll be players like Will Jackson, Phil Salt, Bryden Cass. Sam Curran will come back into things. Harry Brook will be a major part of the rebuild for the next time. I mean, the fact that he hasn't been playing has been slightly astonishing, given that he looks like one of the only blokes who's in any sort of form whatsoever. And things will move forward. You know, I would expect that 90% of England's squad in this World Cup will not play one-day international cricket again. And I'm not saying that as a punishment. That's not sack them all, because, you know, they have been, let's not forget, they have been England's best ever white ball team, bar none. And they have kind of changed the way that the 50-over cricket has been viewed in this country and played in other places. So whilst this has been very disappointing, you also have to take your hat off to them and sort of say, well, you know, it's been an incredible era, but they all come to an end. So, and the reason that they will be overturning is simply because none of them will be available playing 50-over cricket, you would think, in the next World Cup. Yeah. And so the time has come for renewal and for younger players to come in and take their places. And that's the natural order of things. And I reckon that if you look at sort of, even with India, with Australia, with a lot of the top teams, that will be the same thing as well. Only South Africa, perhaps, of the more successful sides in the World Cup so far, have got enough players who are who have another World Cup in them. Yeah. But you would say that a lot of the Indian guys won't make it to the next one. A lot of the Australian guys won't make it to the next one. So there will be a lot of renewal in terms of 50-over cricket. And who knows what the format has in store for us as well in the years coming up.
True, a lot of things are changing and at a very rapid rate. But interesting you say this, Mark, because, you know, we recently, right after that loss, in fact, against India, at the press conference, Jos Butlers asked, so do you still see yourself as the captain in the foreseeable future for white ball cricket, ODIs and T20? And there's not even a pause, and he says, yes. Where does that leave where does this leave Jos Butlers?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting one. You know, Jos the batsman, Jos the sort of one of the best white ball batters there is perhaps more important to England than Jos the leader. And you know, they've made a lot of tactical blunders in this World Cup so far, I think. Around tosses, around sort of some. You change the team to be sort of more sort of specialist in the bowling department, and then you ask yourselves to chase runs when you've not been a particularly successful run chasing side. That's the South Africa game I'm talking about. Fielding first in the blazing heat when nobody can breathe. You know, it just kind of some odd calls have been made tactically. But most importantly, Jos hasn't performed with the bat, and that's the thing that England need from him the most. I would be inclined, because again, I don't think he'll make it to the next World Cup. Again, you think about the landscape of cricket at the moment and the way that the leagues are taking over, and that you know, players are getting pulled from pillar to post, and formats become less attractive. And it's happening now, and it will happen more and more in the future, you should imagine. So the idea that Jos Butlers would, if he remains as captain after this World Cup, would then be leading the team into the next one, I think is unlikely. Yeah. And so, you know, I think if he still has the hunger and the desire to want to play the 50-over format, then absolutely he should be picked and be in the team, you know, to help along the younger guys alongside him. But does he need to be captain to do that? I'm not so sure. So look, it's not something that I'm strong on. I'm not saying sort of axe Buttler, he needs to go. It's not that. It's just I just don't know whether there's any sense in him remaining as captain, and that England should take the opportunity to try and rebuild from the ground up, much in the way that they did when they kept Owen Morgan on after the disaster of the 2015 World Cup. Okay. Get new players in, new fresh impetus, and build from zero, and hopefully put on a better show next time.
Mark, it's been a pleasure as always speaking to you. Thank you so much for taking your time off. And yeah, who knows, we're going to probably, we'll catch up again and see where England heads from here. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Rupha.
It's the dream of every cricketer, the ultimate glory. Few manage to keep their date with destiny. But for many, it's been heartbreaks and a cross to bear. The Holy Grail is here in India. I'm Rupha Ramani, and Firstpost brings you the ringside view. We bring you the Cup of Dreams. Cricket World Cup coverage like never before.